There was a Mark Tooley tweet. Wanted to show this to you, and this is what I was referring to at the beginning of the. Here it is, I think. Yeah, he said, "I learned today of small, excited United Methodist Church that technically joined the Global Methodist Church, but hired a Baptist pastor who's rebaptizing. Laity never learned Wesleyan distinctives. Baptist is now USA default evangelicalism, unless other distinctives are robustly taught." So we'll come back to that tweet in some of the comments, but what he's highlighting there is Methodists have never rebaptized people. The Global Methodist Church, I don't believe, yet has a list of the different denominations we'll acknowledge. I do think we need to have a prolonged, robust conversation about what denominations we'll acknowledge and which ones we won't. Rebaptizing is not a thing. There's just one point where God sets his seal upon you and the church adopts you. And of course, God truly purchases your salvation in the moment. Well, he did it on the cross, but then the moment that is applied to us is in the moment of justification and regeneration. These are things John Wesley talks about. But John Wesley also believed in baptismal regeneration. And he also believed that baptism was the initiative. Well, it's not just him. All Christian traditions see baptism as initiation into the household of God, which is the church. So within the Nicene Creed, we say we confess one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. And that's the way that it's interpreted by a lot of modern people is you can only get baptized once. And so to get rebaptized or to say that you weren't baptized and you need another baptism is to disrespect and dishonor the baptism of the Lord. And so Isaiah in chapter 5, I think, says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil." Well, if you received a perfectly good baptism in the beginning, and then you rebuke that baptism and say, "I need another," well, then that's pretty crappy. I'm not necessarily representing what I believe, but this is what the Methodist Church has always taught and believed. If we are a creedal church and we're in union with the church of the ages, then we do not believe in rebaptism. And, I remember being in junior high in Claremore, Oklahoma, and everybody would go to church camp every summer, and they'd get resaved every summer or rebaptized every summer, one or the other, depending on how Baptist your camp was. And there's a point where it just becomes a bit ridiculous, and you realize people are worshiping their feelings. I didn't have the right feeling. I need a new feeling. I need a new high. And so they do it again and again. And that's not what the Christian faith is supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like a front-end commitment followed by a life of sanctification. And that's what's modeled in the Methodist tradition. So here Tooley is highlighting that there are a lot of churches that are happy to belong to the GMC, but they've never been inculcated in Methodist theology and doctrine. So they quite easily and happily bring in Southern Baptist, Independent Baptist pastors who teach their doctrine and practice, and these churches have no discernment because they were never equipped to be discerning. Now, that's not surprising. The United Methodist Church was terrible at inculcating people in the Methodist heritage because they were in almost always anti-Methodist. So yeah, it didn't suit them to spend too much time on what's in the scriptures or John Wesley's sermons. And yes, those are categorically different. They're not the same thing. Or the creeds or what has historically been done. They felt bound only by the spirit of the age, the conscience of the age. So what's scandalous now is you have a bunch of people who have rebuked the United Methodist Church and left the United Methodist Church and are coming together saying, we're going to reclaim Methodism. But then they still don't know what Methodists teach and preach. Some of that guilt lays at the feet of those local churches that have just chosen not to study this stuff. But a lot of it also lays at the feet of GMC leadership that is much more inclined at this point to do cheerleading than it is to do education. But what is needed is a denomination-wide catechetical effort. By catechetical, I mean indoctrination effort there needs to be basics that are taught throughout the connection immediately, and that's not being done. I sense that there's more of that being talked about than there was before, and of course, we need to be gracious. They've been trying to build this bridge as they're walking across it, but even so, if they don't rein this stuff in, they're going to have a bunch of churches continue to ensconce themselves in religious traditions that are not compatible with the GMC, and they're going to have a bunch of people on the inside that don't want to be on the inside. I'm getting reports from a few people in different places saying we're trying to leave the GMC and they're making it very difficult for us to do so. I've heard one person in Texas tell me that, another person in Louisiana tell me that. What the GMC is wanting to do is grow big, 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 get as many people in, and then what's going to happen if we don't focus on doctrine is we're going to have a bunch of these churches that are not really recognizably Methodist, despite whatever sign they have on the outside of the building. And I don't know what's going to happen from there. We don't really have the means to retain congregations that don't want to be with us, but that's maybe what we're going to be looking at people trying to do. Surely not. When we look at the comments here, Donna says, we were Methodist, then United Methodist for decades, and I have no memory of the church teaching catechism. Now we are Orthodox Presbyterian, PCA, and we begin catechism in the children's church. Isn't that something that would help in teaching these distinctives? And the answer is yes, and we should do that. Joe says, this is absolutely true. We Presbyterians have to unlearn Baptist polity too. This is something that if Methodists are smart, we're going to lean into. But part of the reason why I think we're not leaning into it is we're afraid of what we'll find if we start insisting on stuff. And I think what we'll find is we do not have a lot of uniformity or clarity about what it means to be Methodist. And if we talk about that too much, it might be very divisive.